I was grabbing a late-night bite when some guys at the next table started hitting on me. Out this late? You must work the nightlife scene. Yeah, come on. Take us boys back to your workplace for some fun. They were dead on. I do work the nightlife scene. I run a stall in the ghost market, where my clients are all spirits. And in the ghost market, the living go in, but they don't always come out. What's with the attitude? You're dressed like that for a reason, right? For guys to look at. Exactly. You should be flattered we're paying attention to you. In front of the barbecue joint, a few guys with bleached blonde and purple-dyed hair were crowding a young woman, getting handsy. She couldn't have been much older than 20. She had on heavy smoky eye makeup and a black leather skirt so short it barely covered anything, showing off a pair of long, pale, slender legs. The other customers either pretended not to see, staring down at their food, or were intimidated enough to give the barbecue stand a wide berth. I frowned, walked over with the fried rice I'd just bought, and shoved the blonde guy in the lead. Move it. You're blocking my way to the grill. What the fuck? After getting a good look at me, the blonde guy's eyes lit up, and he let out a sleazy whistle. Well, little lady. Playing the hero are we? I was, in fact, playing the hero. Except the ones I was trying to save were them. Because the girl they were harassing wasn't human. Seeing me interfere, the girl shot me an annoyed glare. It wasn't easy finding something to eat this late at night. Fine, my fault for interrupting her good time. I scooped my fried rice into a bowl, packing it down firmly. Then I flipped it upside down onto another bowl, forming a perfect dome. Finally, I stuck 2 chopsticks straight up into the mound of rice. I pushed the fried rice toward the girl. Don't be mad. Late-night snacks on me. It was an offering for the dead. The girl gave me a surprised look before pulling the bowl toward her and lowering her head to take a gentle sniff. Pfft. The punks had intentionally taken the table right next to ours. Seeing the girl just smelling the food instead of eating it, the blonde guy grinned, showing off a set of perfectly white teeth. He plopped down right next to her and pulled the bowl of rice toward himself. Talk about ungrateful. She offers you food, and you act like it's gone bad. Hey, beautiful, if you're not gonna eat this, I will. Can't let it go to waste. But offerings for the dead aren't meant for the living. The moment the rice touched his lips, he spit it out. Black. This fried rice has no salt. The girl just looked up and stared at him coldly. You ate my food. The blonde guy shot her a flirty wink. So what if I ate your food? It's not like I ate you. What, it's okay for guys to buy you bags and flowers, but you can't buy a guy a bowl of fried rice. Or are you just a gold digger? I suddenly had the urge to slap myself. I knew he was a scumbag, but I didn't realize he could be this much of a scumbag. Why was I trying to save trash like this? The girl's face grew darker and darker. Literally. Her pale skin turned a sickly blue-green, and a large patch of dark red death spots slowly bloomed across her cheeks. The blonde guy screamed and stumbled backward. This woman, her makeup is coming off. What kind of cheap crap is that? Ooh, gross. I can't believe I ate a monster's food. Am I going to get poisoned? The girl's emotions were running too high. Her ghostly energy surged, and she could no longer maintain her human appearance. She shot the blonde guy a hateful glare, her voice as hoarse as a broken gong. I'll be back for you. He waved her away like he was shooing a fly. Only after she was gone did he sidle up to me with a grin. I could tell right away you weren't wearing any makeup. Only a natural beauty like you deserves to eat at my table. Some men are truly more disgusting than ghosts. If I hadn't just dropped $200 on barbecue, I would have been out of there in a second. Hey, it's Stella. You're Stella Lou, right? A heavy-set, middle-aged man walked over to the stand. He kept looking back and forth between his phone and me, then approached with a thrilled expression. I'm a huge fan. I can't believe you live around here too. My name is Stella Lou. I'm a spiritualist and also an influencer. When I have free time, I live stream, telling fortunes and reading feng shui for my followers. Most young people believe in science and aren't really into this stuff. So the majority of my viewers are middle-aged or older. When the blonde guy heard this, he looked astonished. After he figured out I was a spiritualist, he couldn't stop laughing. I've heard of healing crystal influencers and yoga gurus, but a socialite spiritualist is a new one. Rich people really will do anything for attention. The middle-aged man frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Stella is the real deal. The blonde guy stroked his chin, sizing me up. The real deal? At what? Seducing men. That was it. I'd had enough. I stood up, hands on my hips, and let loose a torrent of insults. The cops always say that no matter who starts a fight, the person who throws the first punch bears more responsibility. Chloe wasn't with me tonight, so there was no one to post my bail. So I had to provoke him into swinging first. My verbal assault left him stunned. The middle-aged fan was also dumbfounded. Do all spiritualists have such a potty mouth? Fuck you, shameless bitch. The blonde guy jumped up, his hand raised midair. I leaned in, secretly thrilled. Yes, perfect. You hit me first, and then it's just self-defense. Blade, don't. There are cops over there. A younger guy with green hair grabbed Blade's arm, frantically trying to get his attention. Sure enough, a few uniformed police officers were slowly walking our way. Blade and I locked eyes, and we both sighed in disappointment. Letting him just walk away was infuriating. Blade clearly felt the same way. When I picked up my takeout, Blade and his crew started following me from a distance. I led them on a winding path through deserted alleys, and soon we were on the outskirts of the city. Chloe had set up a camping chair and was sitting on the side of the road, burning spirit money. She looked annoyed when she saw me. What took you so long? Any later and we'll miss tonight's business. Aha! Blade and his guys jumped out from behind a tree, hands on their hips, looking at me triumphantly. Putting on an act for me earlier, huh? I knew you worked the nightlife. What? You think our money's not good enough for you? That's fine. We'll just have our fun and not pay, ha ha ha. Chloe was confused, but that didn't stop her from getting pissed. I clapped a hand over her mouth and smiled at Blade. All right then. Just follow us. And make sure you keep up. The crew of rainbow-haired punks started whistling when they saw Chloe. They slung their arms around each other, grinning and joking. Blade's got a good eye, man. A piece like that must go for a few thousand a night, right? I squeezed Chloe's hand hard, signaling her to get back to burning the paper. Chloe's eyes darted around, and she lowered her voice. You're not actually planning to take them into the ghost market, are you? With nothing better to do lately, I'd been taking Chloe with me to set up a stall in the ghost market. The ghost market is a place for transactions between the living and the dead. It's usually set up at a crossroads between the worlds of yin and yang, and you have to open a spirit path to get in. Furthermore, ordinary people can't just come and go as they please. It's a place of extreme yin energy. Spending one night in the ghost market would drain a person's life force, leaving them shrouded in yin. Someone with a weaker constitution could get seriously ill and have 3 years of bad luck. Even a young, healthy person full of yang energy would be left weakened for some time. And during that period, they'd be extremely vulnerable to being haunted by wandering ghosts. This crew of punks was clearly the dregs of society. Taking them for a tour of the ghost market felt like serving justice on behalf of the heavens. Chloe raised an eyebrow and started working faster. She unfolded a large stack of spirit money, tossing it into the brazier pile by pile. The yellow and white paper turned to black ash in the flames, swirling into a small gray tornado in the air. I took out an incense burner and respectfully lit 3 soul-guiding incense sticks. Spirit money to pave the way, soul-guiding incense to light it. The gate to the underworld opened. Blade rubbed his eyes in confusion. That's weird. Wasn't this a 3-way intersection? Why is it a crossroads now? The fresh-faced young man with green hair swallowed hard, looking scared. Blade, this place is creepy. Those 2 women, one was burning paper, the other was lighting incense. It's too weird. Maybe we should just go back. After coming all this way, I wasn't about to let them run off. I scoffed at Blade. Don't tell me you're scared. Chloe and I turned and walked down the spirit path. Blade and his crew rolled up their sleeves and followed behind us. Blade, why is it so cold on this road? Look, my hair is standing on end. Blade, I've got a really bad feeling about this. Let's go back. The whole way, the green-haired guy wouldn't shut up, trying to convince Blade to turn back. Finally, Blade lost it and slapped him across the face. Shut the fuck up. The green-haired guy didn't shut up. Instead, he started screaming at the top of his lungs. Blade, we're missing someone. I quickly turned my head and realized he was right. The number of punks was off. I'd counted them just a minute ago. The Rainbow Crew had 5 members. Now there were only 4. The guy with the purple hair was gone. A chill went down my spine. The spirit path connects the realms of the living and the dead. It's inevitable that wandering ghosts haunt it. If a living person gets lost on the spirit path, chances are they'll never return to the world of the living. These guys might be punks, but I was the one who led them here. If they died, I'd have to bear a portion of the karmic consequences. With that thought, I stopped and walked back toward Blade and his crew. When did he go missing? Who was the last person to see him? Blade, who had been getting anxious, flashed a lewd grin as I approached. Worried you're losing customers? Don't worry, the rest of us are more than enough to satisfy you too. There are no cops on the spirit path. No cameras either. I didn't hesitate to swing my palm. I'll satisfy you right now. Seeing me make the first move, Chloe came running over, practically tripping over herself. Let me have him. Experts say that exercise releases dopamine and endorphins. It can relieve stress and make you feel happy. The experts were right. I crouched down and happily patted Blade's face. Had enough? If not, we can go a few more rounds. I'd punched him square in the nose, and now he was lying on the ground, a mess of tears and snot. Merci, Mum. Have mercy. After a good beating, the guys were much more cooperative. The green-haired guy, his face bruised and swollen, raised his head and hunched his shoulders. 10 minutes ago, Rooster kept saying this place was giving him the creeps, making him so nervous he had to pee. He probably got scared and bailed. Blade glared at him furiously. Then why were you screaming your head off and scaring the crap out of me? The green-haired guy looked down pitifully. I was really scared, Blade. I just thought, if I scared you, maybe you'd turn back. Not much courage, but plenty of cunning. But now none of them could go back. Chloe and I herded the group and walked quickly toward the entrance of the ghost market. On the desolate and silent road, a graveyard suddenly appeared. The central tomb was a pile of broken stones, with a gray tombstone in the middle engraved with the 2 words, Ghost Market. Scattered around it were burial mounds of yellow earth, varying in size. In front of each mound stood a different kind of tombstone, and on top of every mound sat a person. Cursed objects for sale, premium corpse oil, ghost tears. The inscriptions on the tombstones were dizzying. I led Blade and his crew straight through to the center of the market. Next to the stone tomb, there was a small burial mound. The tombstone in front of it was pink. 4 large characters were carved on it in a flamboyant, cursive script, fulfilling ghostly wishes. This was the stall Chloe and I ran in the ghost market, where we helped ghosts fulfill their lingering attachments and last wishes. Blade and his friends were staring wide-eyed. The green-haired guy peeked out from behind him, trembling as he asked, "Ma'am, are you guys cosplaying? This set is kind of terrifying." The ghost market was much safer than the spirit path. At least there was no risk of getting lost. I couldn't be bothered to waste my breath on them, and just waved them away. All right, don't get in the way of my business. Go look around on your own. Come find us here in 2 hours, and I'll take you back to the city. Blade was a little scared and wanted to say something else, but the green-haired guy tugged his sleeve and pulled him away. That one at least knew how to read a room. Chloe and I set up 2 camping chairs and got ready for business. Before long, a young female ghost walked up to our tombstone. She had a delicate oval face and big eyes. You could tell she'd been a pretty girl when she was alive. She stared intently at the tombstone for a long time before finally speaking, her voice hoarse. Can you help me kill a few people?" I was a bit taken aback. "Honey, killing people is against the law." The ghost was speechless. "You're running a stall in the ghost market, and you're worried about breaking the law?" I puffed out my chest, full of righteous indignation. Obeying the law is the fundamental duty of every citizen. The ghost's name was Amy Zhang. She'd been dead for 2 years. When she died, she was a student at a local business college. Her family wasn't well off. Her father passed away when she was young, and her mother raised her and her older brother alone. She had to borrow money from relatives just to go to college. Seeing her dorm mates eating well, dressing stylishly, and living it up, Amy was incredibly envious. To hide her poverty from her classmates, Amy started taking out high-interest loans. The more she borrowed, the deeper in debt she got. The loan sharks from the mob started pressuring her to sell her body to pay them back. She couldn't bring herself to do it. In the end, overcome with fear and despair, she committed suicide. I want revenge so badly, but I can't go back to the world of the living. Those mobsters deserve to die. If you help me get revenge, I'll pay any price. That was a bit of an exaggeration. She had died by suicide. Those who take their own lives are barred from the cycle of reincarnation. Their spirits are weak, and they can't return to the living world for revenge. They can only drift endlessly in the underworld, never to see the light of day. Regardless, I was a spiritualist, not a hitman. Amy's story was tragic, but I couldn't kill people for her. Seeing that I wouldn't agree, Amy started throwing a tantrum, pulling at me and Chloe. I don't care. I want revenge and you have to help me. This ghost had died a miserable death and had very little spiritual power. If I hit her a few times, I was afraid I'd scatter her soul to the wind. In the end, Amy spent the night crying, screaming, and rolling around at our stall. Not only did we not make a single sale, but she also tore my clothes. When Blade and his crew came back at the agreed-upon time, I had a grim look on my face as I quickly led them out of the ghost market. Blade, Green Hair, and the others kept turning their heads to look at the female ghost. Green Hair looked curious. "Ma'am, is that girl your friend?" I shot him an annoyed glare. "She's your grandma." Green Hair didn't say anything else, just lowered his head. He seemed to be hiding something in his coat. Blade and the others were also carrying bulging bags. I was a little surprised. Transactions in the ghost market required bartering. If you couldn't offer something the stall owner wanted, you could also pay with money. And the ghost market only accepted gold. It looked like Blade and his crew had bought something there. I just didn't know if they had something to trade, or if they had gold. Time was tight, so I hurried Blade and his crew along. Chloe grabbed my arm, her brows knitted together. "I have a feeling something's off about that ghost girl." I nodded, a strange feeling rising in my chest. That girl looked vaguely familiar. But for the life of me, I couldn't remember where I'd seen her. Everything about tonight felt bizarre. As we left the spirit path, Blade and his crew, afraid I'd ask them questions, took off like a shot. Chloe and I, loaded down with bags, made our way to the car. Chloe tossed everything into the trunk, looking displeased. "It's all that ghost girl's fault. Another night with no business, sigh." We had been setting up our stall in the ghost market for a whole month, and hadn't gotten a single customer. Making money is so hard. I leaned back in my seat, about to close my eyes for a moment. Holy shit! Screech. My eyes flew open, and I was scared out of my wits by the scene in front of me. A figure had suddenly appeared in front of the car. To avoid hitting them, Chloe jerked the steering wheel to the left. We were on a sharp curve, and a large truck was barreling toward us without slowing down. With no other choice, Chloe had to swerve again. The car shot off to the left. And this was a winding mountain road. The airbags deployed, pinning Chloe and me in our seats. The car tumbled down the mountain. As the world spun around me, I had to marvel at the quality of Chloe's car. A multi-million-dollar luxury vehicle, indeed. It rolled off a cliff, and not a single window broke. Thump. The car landed, not with the massive impact I expected, but with a huge splash. My heart sank. Half of this mountain road ran alongside a lake. But based on how far we'd driven, we should have passed that lake long ago. Gurgle, gurgle. The car was sinking to the bottom of the lake at an alarming rate. Slash. Chloe whipped out the dagger she always carried and sliced through the airbags. Fighting off dizziness, we fumbled around inside the car. Ugh, I think I have a concussion. Gag. Stop kicking, you idiot. It's bulletproof glass. Chloe's face was pale as she dry heaved, but she still managed to roll her eyes at me. The water pressure made it impossible to open the doors. Breaking a window was our only way out. There was no window breaker or any other tool in the car. I gritted my teeth, gathered my energy, and channeled my inner strength into my legs. Today, I'll show you what real Chinese martial arts. Before my leg could even fly out, I was doused with cold water. Water poured in from above, and the car sank even faster. Chloe, half submerged in water, shot me a smug look. Are you stupid? This car is a convertible. With the roof open, we held our breath and swam for the surface. The car's headlights were incredibly bright, illuminating the water around us clearly. That's why, from a distance, I saw several dark shapes swimming rapidly toward us. Chloe was so startled she let out a stream of bubbles, her face looking as pale as a drowned ghost's. We'd been up all night and had both sustained some injuries from the fall. My shoulder ached as I swam, and I couldn't put much force into my strokes. Chloe was in worse shape. It looked like she was still dizzy. The good news was, it was a swarm of water snakes, most of which weren't venomous. The bad news was, the snakes seemed to be fleeing from something. I gave Chloe a look, signaling her to swim faster. Instead of speeding up, Chloe curled into a ball, her face contorted in pain. Oh no, her leg was cramping. I cursed silently and had to turn back to help her. As I was trying to massage her calf muscle, Chloe pointed frantically behind me, her face filled with terror. I whipped my head around, and my pupils constricted. That fish was huge. It was a grayish-green fish, long and slender, with 2 rows of dagger-like teeth in its mouth. Just looking at its head, you'd think it was a crocodile. Was that an alligator gar? No wonder so many people came to this lake to fish every day, but always went home empty-handed. The local forums were all saying the fish in this lake had become spirits and wouldn't take the bait. With this giant alligator gar around, all the other fish in the lake had probably ended up in its stomach. Alligator gars are ferocious carnivores. They don't just eat fish, they eat any living thing in the water. I kicked Chloe away and scrambled backward, choking on a mouthful of water. The alligator gar shot between us. Up close, the fish was even bigger. It was about 4 or 5 meters long, with a head as big as a water tank. I felt the same helplessness I would facing a shark. Chloe frantically swam to my side and shoved a dagger into my hand. I felt a surge of despair. The scales of this fish get harder as it ages. Judging by its size, it had been living in this lake for who knows how many years. A mere dagger would probably only leave a scratch. Oh well, a desperate situation calls for a desperate measure. There was no time to think. The alligator gar, having missed its first attack, had already turned around and was charging at us again. I couldn't chant spells or use talismans in the water. In this life or death moment, I swam straight toward the alligator gar. It opened its mouth, its sharp teeth glinting menacingly in the water. I twisted my body to the side, quickly grabbed its wide-open gill, and then gripping the dagger, stabbed hard at its eye. A direct hit. Bright red blood spread through the lake water. I held the dagger tightly and twisted it viciously in the fish's eye. In pain, the alligator gar began to struggle wildly. I felt like I was on a roller coaster. The world was spinning, and I felt dizzy. My arm was starting to lose its strength, and my chest felt like it was about to explode. My consciousness started to fade. I could feel faint wisps of gray mist flowing out of my body. Boom! I don't know how long the alligator gar had been dragging me through the water, but a massive explosion jolted me awake. Stella, let go. It turned out that, at some point, the alligator gar had surfaced. Chloe was standing on the shore, throwing torpedoes in my direction. Wait, where did she get torpedoes? I let go. The exhausted alligator gar, too scared by the torpedoes to bother with me, fled in a panic. I'm so tired, I really thought I was going to die in this lake. I lay on my back on the shore, completely drained, feeling like every bone in my body ached. Chloe wiped the water from her face and came over to help me up, still shaken. Good thing the insurance company got here so quickly. Insurance company? I managed to lift my head and saw that Chloe was surrounded by people. Chloe had taken out a high-value personal safety insurance policy. All her cars were equipped with GPS trackers and alarm buttons. The moment the button was pressed, the insurance company's response team would be dispatched for a rescue. What I thought were torpedoes weren't actually torpedoes. They were bombs. Man, rich people are hard to kill. I closed my eyes as a wave of drowsiness washed over me. Stella, don't fall asleep. Chloe gave my thigh a hard pinch and sighed. I think we're caught in a ghost loop. This is the 4th time the car has passed this curve. The insurance team stayed behind to clean up the mess by the lake and sent a car to take us home. The driver was a retired soldier, tall and well-built, with an instantly reassuring presence. Right now, his lips were pressed into a tight line, a hint of gloom in his eyes. Miss Song, I've driven this road many times. I've never encountered a situation like today. I slapped my cheeks a couple of times, trying to stay awake. I glanced at the time. It was almost 4 in the morning. In a little over an hour, the sun would be up. How could we be stuck in a ghost loop at a time like this? Chloe scratched her head. All my magical tools were in the car, and my talismans got soaked. Do you have anything on you? I fumbled around in my pockets and finally pulled out a palm-sized statue from my pants pocket. The statue was made of a kind of yellowish-brown clay. It was an old woman in ancient clothing, with harsh features and a thin, severe face. She clutched a broom tightly in her hand, her lips slightly parted as if she were cursing someone. Chloe curiously took the statue and held it in her hand. What's this? Harry Potter's grandma? As she moved it, thin wisps of gray mist, visible to the naked eye, seeped out of the statue. Then they wrapped around Chloe like a spider's web. Chloe didn't notice a thing and brought the statue closer to her face for a better look. She normally had a very striking and vibrant appearance. A full forehead, a spirited expression. No matter when, she always looked full of life. But now, her face was covered in a layer of grayish decay, and the space between her eyebrows was gradually turning black. At a glance, she looked like an unlucky ghost who had gambled away his family fortune on opium. This statue was sucking away Chloe's luck. Holy crap, get rid of that filthy thing. My horrified expression scared Chloe. Without thinking, she opened the car window and tried to throw it out. But the statue seemed to be stuck to her hand. No matter how she swung her arm, the statue didn't budge. Bang! Screech! The piercing sound of brakes squealed again. The driver turned his head with a wry smile. Miss Song, it seems we have a flat tire. Chloe was on the verge of despair. Damn it! Is it really this hard to just go home and get some sleep? I took a deep breath, plucked the statue from her hand, and placed it respectfully on the car seat. Great Star Lord, I spoke foolishly just now. As soon as we get home, I will prepare a grand sacrificial feast for you as an apology. I will set up an altar at home and offer incense to you daily. Chloe was bewildered. Stella, who are you talking to? It's not this Harry Potter grandma, is it? Smack. I slapped a hand over her mouth and shot her a desperate look. Shut up. Do not be disrespectful to the deity. The driver got out to fix the tire. Chloe and I didn't want to stay in the car, so we squatted on the side of the road and chatted. Chloe glanced nervously at the car, her voice barely a whisper. That person, is it really the legendary broom star? I stared straight ahead, my eyes full of sorrow. I almost wanted a cigarette. Yeah. Ever heard the saying? Inviting a god is easy, but sending one away is hard. Back when the sage Jiangxia was appointing gods, he made his ex-wife the broom star. The meaning is clear. Wherever the broom star appears, bad luck, misfortune, and disaster will follow. This statue was made from cursed earth. What is cursed earth? It's the soil from the grave of someone who died an unlucky death. You've probably heard stories about unlucky people choking to death on water, dying from a simple fall, even getting electrocuted while fishing. These people have unfortunate birth charts and meet a tragic end when they clash with an extremely inauspicious astrological year. 7 days after their burial, you take the soil from their grave mound, and that becomes cursed earth. A statue of the broom star made from cursed earth. Its power is, all gods have their worshippers. For thousands of years, only the broom star has received almost no offerings from the mortal world. Now that she's latched onto us, she won't leave easily. As long as she's here, we'll have a day of bad luck. If I'm not mistaken, that broom star statue was secretly planted on me by that ghost girl, Amy, back at the ghost market. That's why we've had this string of bizarre incidents. The car crash, falling off the cliff, landing in the lake, encountering the alligator gar, and after narrowly escaping, getting stuck in a ghost loop. Luckily, we're both tough and have strong birth charts. If we were just ordinary people, we would have died 800 times over. But with all this bad luck and misfortune clinging to us, there's no way we can break out of this ghost loop. We have no choice but to wait here until dawn. Once the sun comes out, the evil energy will naturally dissipate. Chloe looked melancholic. We've fought zombies and vanquished evil ghosts. But how do you deal with the god? That's right. The Broom Star is an officially appointed deity with a divine rank. Mortals, naturally, can't fight against gods. I let out a long sigh. I really couldn't figure out why Amy would plant this thing on us. For the next 2 hours, the Broom Star didn't cause any more trouble. My earlier promises must have worked. By the time the driver fixed the tire and got us home, Chloe and I were so tired we could barely keep our eyes open. Oh, for crying out loud! The moment Chloe stepped through the door, her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees. I just tilted my head back and stared blankly at a gray pigeon flying overhead. A huge bird dropping had just landed squarely on top of my head. I wiped the bird poop from my hair with my hand, then expressionlessly smeared it on Chloe's clothes. You're so clumsy. Let me help you up. The Broom Star was clearly impatient to start enjoying her offerings. A full sacrificial feast of 3 livestock and 6 poultry represents the highest form of ritual offering. The 3 livestock are an ox, a sheep, and a pig. The 6 poultry are a horse, an ox, a sheep, a pig, a dog, and a chicken. Chloe had her people buy everything, but I didn't dare let them into the house. They were ordinary people. If they got too close to the Broom Star, someone with a weaker constitution might have an accident that very day. By the time we had the altar and the statue set up, it was nearly noon. Chloe and I knelt on cushions in front of it, staring at the statue's increasingly clear features, on the verge of tears. After absorbing some of the incense smoke, the gray mist around the statue grew thicker. Chloe sniffled and forced a smile that was uglier than crying. I think I can smell a musty odor. She wasn't wrong. A house that worships the Broom Star does indeed give off a faint, musty smell. Out on the street, people with sharp intuition would feel uncomfortable around you and wouldn't want to get close. Whatever. Musty is musty. The most urgent thing now was to get some sleep. Chloe and I were woken up by the smell of smoke. The curtains in the room were half burnt, and Chloe's favorite rug had 2 large holes burned through it. She always had a habit of lighting scented candles when she slept. While we were asleep, a candle somehow tipped over, starting a fire. Luckily, we woke up early and didn't burn to death in the house. Chloe and I sat on the stone bench in the yard, covered in soot. We looked at each other, our hearts heavy with sorrow. I don't want to live anymore. I'd rather just die. I sighed and patted my rumbling stomach. The Broom Star has finally found someone willing to worship her. Don't worry, we won't die that easily. We just won't be living well either. What can drown one's sorrows? Only barbecue. Back at the familiar barbecue joint, Chloe and I ran into that crew of rainbow-haired punks again. Blade's face went pale when he saw us. Boss, it's them. These are the 2 women who killed our brothers. I held a handful of lamb skewers, my brain struggling to keep up. What the hell was he talking about? Behind Blade stood a short, bald man. His face was menacing, his expression fierce. He waved a hand at Blade, a lustful glint in his eyes. Take them. Only then did I notice that several members of the Rainbow crew were missing. Besides the bald man, there was only Blade and Green Hair. Where were the other hairs? Blade wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. After the beating we gave him last time, I couldn't believe he dared to show his face again. In contrast, the green-haired guy was much smarter. His eyes darted around. He shouted loudly but hid behind Blade. It was them. They're the ones who killed Rooster and the others. Chloe and I were already bottling up a storm of frustration. Seeing these guys willingly serve themselves up, we weren't about to be polite. The moment Blade reached out his hand, I stepped forward, grabbed his arm, and prepared to snap it. Some damn kid had left a toy car on the ground. I stepped on it and went flying, landing flat on my back. My head slammed hard against the wooden bench behind me, leaving me dazed for a good while. Chloe was stunned. The Broom Star isn't even on you, and you're still this unlucky? I scrambled up from the ground, disheveled. What good does it do if I'm not carrying it? We've been marinating in bad luck. Blade stared at us grimly, his hand in his coat pocket, pointing it at me. Don't move. One more wrong move, and my gun might not have eyes. Chloe and I snapped our heads up. So that's why this guy had the guts to mess with us today. He had a gun. It was a drizzly, overcast day, and very few people were out for a late-night meal. The barbecue joint was mostly empty. Besides us, there was only a young couple sitting at a table on the street. Blade followed my gaze and let out a sarcastic smile. About to die, and you still have time to worry about others? The situation was not in our favor. Seeing that we didn't dare move, Green Hair pulled a pre-prepared rope from his bag. It was a thick hemp rope, the kind you often see in villages. Up close, I could almost smell a faint scent of blood. But with my body shrouded in bad luck, my spiritual senses were dull, and even my third eye was useless. For a moment, I couldn't tell what was strange about the rope. Green Hair tied my and Chloe's hands together and gave the bald man a fawning smile. Boss, it's all taken care of. Chloe sighed. After holding it in for a long time, she finally managed to choke out a sentence that made her cringe. Do you know who my dad is? Her voice was quieter than a mosquito's buzz. Just then, an ambulance drove by with its siren blaring, completely drowning out her faint words. Chloe couldn't muster the courage to say it a second time. She sullenly shut her mouth and let Blade push her toward a van. Blade was feeling pretty smug. And when people get smug, they tend to get carried away. Seeing no one around, he grew bold and started waving the gun around my head. You bitch, you really think you can take on our Dragon Tiger Gang just because you know a little kung fu? The Dragon Tiger Gang? That cheesy name sounded familiar. I shook my head, unable to recall where I'd heard it. This bad luck didn't just make you slow, it made you stupid. It was terrifying. Seeing me shake my head, Blade got angry. Fuck, you dare to dodge? You think I won't blow your brains out right now? Of course, I didn't believe him. So not only did I ignore him, but I also stomped hard on his foot. Blade yelped in pain, his face contorted with rage. Fuck. He jerked his hand and pressed the trigger, holding the gun to my forehead. A wave of panic hit my chest. I yanked Chloe hard, pulling her down into a crouch with me. Bang. A loud shot rang out next to my ear. The gun had, indeed, gone off by accident. The bullet flew over our heads, hit a street sign, and then ricocheted, hitting Blade right between the eyes. He was still frozen in the gun-toting pose. Blood gushed from his forehead. Blade glared at me one last time before falling backward, his face a mask of disbelief. The bald man and Green Hair were stunned by this turn of events. You killed Blade. Green Hair fell to his knees, overcome with grief and anger, his eyes shooting daggers at me. Boss, I told you these two women know black magic. The bald man's eyes were bloodshot, flashing with a mixture of hatred and fear. So it was you. Good. I can finally get my revenge. My brain was getting foggier and foggier. Why couldn't I understand what they were saying? The bald man was much more cautious than Blade. He ordered Green Hair to drive while he picked up the gun from the ground and pointed it at us. In the car, he didn't say a word, just kept sizing us up with his eyes. His hand never loosened its grip on the gun. I stared at the dark muzzle, and something felt very wrong. This gun wasn't going to go off a second time, was it? Where did you get that gun? Shut up. No talking. Green Hair glanced back at us and slammed on the gas. Boss, be careful. So many of our brothers died at their hands. These two women are seriously bad news. Finally, I was starting to understand a little. After they left the ghost market, this gang of punks started dying one by one for unknown reasons. Now only Green Hair and their bald boss were left, and they were blaming it all on us. The van sped recklessly through the city, and before long, we were on the eastern outskirts. It was a field of abandoned, half-finished buildings. 7 or 8 high-rises stood starkly in a desolate lot, their shadows looming, creating a bleak scene. I'd heard of this development. It was sold at a ridiculously high price, but then the developer took the money and fled the country. The working-class people who bought property here were saddled with massive mortgages. Some couldn't take the pressure and jumped from the rooftops. Pandora's box had been opened. Within a month, 9 people died tragically in these abandoned buildings. Everyone said the place was haunted, and it became even more desolate. I walked quietly behind the bald man looking around. I felt countless sinister gazes fixed on us. The bald man and green hair led us to the ground floor of the northernmost building. I don't know where they got the power from, but a few yellowed light bulbs hung from the ceiling, casting a dim glow. A row of sofas lined the concrete wall, with a wooden coffee table in front. The room had a faint smell of urine that made you want to wrinkle your nose. I had to admit, the bald man knew how to pick a spot. Almost no one ever came to this godforsaken place. People spoke of it in hushed tones. It was practically a forbidden zone. If Chloe and I died here, our bodies would probably rot before anyone found them. Oh wait, that rich bitch Chloe has insurance. She'd probably be found the moment she died. The bald man sat down on the sofa and let out a sigh of relief. Ben, go strip them. We don't want any funny business later. Chloe and I always carry our magical tools and talismans with us. But with the broom star in the house, its unlucky aura would diminish the power of our tools. We had specifically packed away our talismans, peachwood swords, and other items and left them at Chloe's villa downtown. Right now, apart from a small dagger, we had nothing on us. Ben, what are you waiting for? The bald man, holding the gun, was getting impatient. Hurry up. The longer we wait, the more can go wrong. So the green-haired guy's name was Ben. His last name was also Zhang. Something clicked in my mind. I studied his pale, thin face, and the more I looked, the more familiar he seemed. You're that ghost girl's brother. Amy Zhang's brother. Shut up. Ben's face changed dramatically, his narrow eyes widening in fury. What right do you have to mention my sister? So this was all a setup by this pair of siblings? You're the one who killed Blade and his crew, aren't you? What did you have them buy at the ghost market? I remembered that before entering the ghost market, green hair Ben had been wearing a fairly thick gold chain. After he came out, the chain was gone. Blade and the others must have bought their things with that chain. Ben let out a low laugh, bent down, and casually picked up a baseball bat that was lying nearby. Not bad, Stella Lou. You're not as dumb as you look. The bald man was completely bewildered. It took him a moment to realize Ben had played him. Ben, you son of a bitch. You dared to lie to me. He furiously pointed the gun at Ben, his eyes practically shooting fire. I've treated you well, and you dare to betray me. Chloe, finally catching on, was also furious. Are you insane? This bald guy's gang is the Dragon Tigers, right? The ones who gave out the high-interest loans. They're the ones who drove your sister to suicide. What does that have to do with us? I didn't say anything, just secretly eyed the gun. I knew how Blade and the others had died. That gun was a cursed object. An item used by someone with a heart full of resentment to commit suicide becomes a cursed object. After they die, their soul attaches itself to the object, and they can't move on to the afterlife until they find a replacement. So the bullets fired from that gun will only hit the person holding it. That was why Ben completely ignored the bald man. He just stared intently at Chloe, his eyes as cold and venomous as a snake's. Good, very good. Stella Lou, you've forgotten too, haven't you? Forgotten how you helped kill my sister? The bald man, enraged that no one was taking him seriously even with a gun in his hand, flew into a rage. Fuck. You're asking to die. Bang. Just before he fired, he stepped on a beer bottle and slipped. As he fell, he flailed his arms to keep his balance. And just like that, the bullet went straight through his temple. Blood and brain matter exploded in front of my eyes. Chloe gasped, but Ben didn't even turn his head. He stared at me without blinking, as if searching my face for something. Stella Lou, say something. Don't you remember my sister either? I looked at him steadily. I remember. By now, I had remembered everything. 2 years ago, I saw a girl on the street with a dark aura around her face. I stopped her and told her not to borrow money from anyone, or she might be in mortal danger. The girl scoffed at my warning. I gave her a protective talisman, and she tore it to shreds in front of me and threw it in the trash. Get away from me, you damn scammer. That girl was Amy Zhang. Everyone has their own destiny and karma. Seeing her resolute attitude, and since I had other things to attend to, I didn't press the matter further. After I finished speaking, Ben started frantically beating the concrete wall with the baseball bat. It was you. You're the one who killed her. You could have saved her back then. You stood by and did nothing. You should die with her. Chloe was dumbfounded. Are you nuts? How can you blame this on Stella? Your sister took out the loans herself. She tore up the talisman herself. What does that have to do with us? You can't save someone who's determined to die you. Ben raised the bat and lunged at Chloe. I broke out in a cold sweat. Chloe nimbly dodged to the side, forgetting that our hands were tied together. Her movement sent me right into the path of Ben's bat. I kicked Ben away, but lost my own balance and went tumbling to the ground, taking Chloe with me. Someone had left a few broken bricks on the floor. Chloe and I landed right on them, the pain so intense it took us a moment to recover. Ben clutched his chest and stood up, suddenly smiling. Stella Lou, guess what I have prepared for you? As he spoke, he dragged a large woven bag from behind the sofa. Inside the bag was a half-man-sized iron cage. Crouched inside was a massive black cat, almost the size of a German shepherd. Its fur was glossy black, and its eyes were one gray, one black. Seeing Chloe and me, the cat got extremely excited, stood up, and started wagging its tail and circling inside the cage. It was a 9-souls cat. In ancient times, evil sorcerers bred a type of demonic cat specifically for killing. They were fed with the flesh and blood of living people. After consuming 9 victims, the 9-souls cat was considered complete. They were savage by nature, as strong as tigers and leopards, and loved to eat humans. But this 9-souls cat's eyes hadn't completely turned black yet. It looked like it was still one person short. Thank goodness. An incomplete 9-souls cat was something Chloe and I could still fight. Ha 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 ha. Ben seemed to read my thoughts and threw his head back, laughing again. He looked even more unhinged. Stella Lou, I know what you're thinking. You don't really think you have a chance to escape, do you? What happened next left Chloe and me completely dumbfounded. Ben walked over to the bald man's body and used a dagger to cut out his heart. Then he smeared the blood from the heart onto his own neck. He walked step by step toward the cage, like a demon emerging from hell, his eyes filled with madness and ferocity. Amy, don't be afraid. Everyone who ever hurt you has to die. Brother is coming to be with you soon. You'll never be alone again. He opened the cage. The moment the 9-souls cat was free, it pounced on him and tore out his throat. Hurry up, come on. Chloe and I were frantically trying to cut the rope with a dagger, sweating profusely. Ben was a certified lunatic, using himself to complete the 9-souls cat. Once the cat was done with him, Chloe and I, shrouded in bad luck, would be no match for it. Not to mention, we didn't have any of our magical tools. The cat seemed to have been starved for a long time. It devoured him in huge gulps incredibly fast. I thought I could even see Ben's stark white ribs. This madman. Chloe's dagger was a high-quality, custom-made blade, capable of cutting through iron like mud. But after sawing at it for what felt like an eternity, we couldn't break the rope. My brain was so clouded by misfortune. This rope was probably a cursed object too. An ordinary dagger would never be able to cut it. I gripped the dagger tightly and sliced a deep gash across my palm. The rope finally snapped. Chloe and I rubbed our wrists and stood up, only to be met by a pair of eyes as deep and dark as ink. Gulp. Chloe tugged at my sleeve and swallowed hard. The 9-souls cat seemed even bigger now. It stood there, its gaze heavy, its eyes locked on us like a leopard's. Is it looking at us? The 9-souls cat narrowed its eyes, its gaze slowly shifting from me to Chloe. I stepped in front of Chloe, feeling a little sorry for her. It sized us up. It thinks you're weaker, so it'll go for you first. Chloe sucked in a sharp breath. In that instant, the 9-souls cat moved. A swift black shadow shot past my side, so fast I barely had time to react. The dagger in my hand scraped across its tail, making a sound like metal on metal. Thump. It swatted Chloe with a paw, sending her flying several meters through the air. She slammed against the concrete wall and fell to the ground with a muffled thud. Cough, cough. Chloe clutched her chest in agony, spitting out a large mouthful of blood. The pungent smell of blood filled the air. I bent down, my eyes fixed on the 9-souls cat, my mind racing. Although the Nine Souls cat was an evil creature, it was a creature of yang, or life force. Living beings are yang, and the number 9 is the ultimate yang number. Furthermore, ancient sorcerers would regularly feed them glutinous rice mixed with cinnabar. A fully matured Nine Souls cat feared neither ghosts nor the usual talismans and peachwood swords. It was extremely difficult to deal with. At this point, the only option was to fight Yin with yang. Chloe, go check the stuff Ben brought. We'll use those cursed objects against this cat. I picked up the rope I had just cut in two. Thankfully, the Yin energy was still there. Wrapping the rope around my hand, I crouched down and slowly approached the Nine Souls cat. It twitched its nose, seeming to sense the strangeness of the rope. Seeing Chloe stumble toward the sofa, the Nine Souls cat threw its head back with a piercing shriek and lunged at me. I gritted my teeth and charged straight at it. Thump. My body felt like it had been hit by a small car. Even for someone as tough as me, the pain made me grit my teeth. The Nine Souls cat tried to get past me to Chloe, so I grimaced and met its charge again. Chloe searched the room, and seeing me get repeatedly knocked around by the cat, she was on the verge of tears. Damn it, there's nothing here. Ben really was a cunning bastard. I rolled on the ground a few times, feeling like all my bones were about to break. Something was digging into my backside, causing a sharp pain. I reached down and my hand closed around a dark, heavy gun. The gun? The gun. With the gun in one hand and the rope in the other, I pushed off the ground and charged at the Nine Souls cat. In the struggle, I managed to wrap the rope around its neck. Its movements visibly faltered, its speed slowing down. Now's my chance. I clung to its head, aimed the gun at my own, and pulled the trigger. Stilla. Amidst Chloe's horrified scream, the bullet fired. But it didn't hit my head. It hit the Nine Souls cat. Even though I was shrouded in bad luck, the broom star had finally found such a generous worshipper. Before I left the house today, I had placed a whole handful of incense sticks in the burner. I also laid out 6 plates of fruit and 6 plates of pastries. Most people don't even get that kind of treatment on New Year's. I was betting the broom star wouldn't let me die. I bet right. When Chloe and I, covered in wounds, stumbled back home, we found the yard surrounded by people. A garbage truck, while passing our house, had somehow inexplicably crashed into the yard. The city had recently implemented strict garbage sorting rules. This truck was filled entirely with kitchen waste. The smell was truly something else. We exchanged pale glances, half wishing the Nine Souls cat had just finished us off. After cleaning up the mess, I lay in bed, questioning my life choices. Inviting a god is easy, sending one away is hard. How on earth could I get rid of this broom star quickly? I drifted into a restless sleep, and was woken up before dawn the next day. 2 old ladies were arguing at the gate. It escalated into a physical fight, and eventually the police were called. There was no going back to sleep. Like zombies, Chloe and I walked to the park and sat on a bench by the lake, staring blankly. I want to cry. I want to die. Is the rest of our life going to be like this? Chloe looked up at the sky, her eyes welling up. I was equally desperate. Neither of us spoke again. We sat in silence, 1,000 unshed tears between us. Just then my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but the voice was very familiar. You idiot. How can I have such a stupid grand disciple? Master. It was my master. My master's voice sounded weary. Stella, you're going to be the death of me. Back then, Jiangxia's wife, Lady Ma, despised him for being a good-for-nothing. She berated him daily and even forced him to divorce her. Later, when Jiangxia became a powerful official, she regretted it and hanged herself. After Jiangxia finished appointing the gods, he made her the broom star. Lady Ma became a laughingstock because of this. She hated Jiangxia so much that she once swore she would never see him again in this life. Do you understand now? I slapped my thigh so hard that Chloe leaped up from the bench with a yelp. I get it. Thank you, master. Before I could finish, my master had already hung up. I hadn't seen her in a long time. I wondered what she was busy with. But right now the most important thing was to get rid of the broom star. Suddenly, Chloe and I weren't tired anymore. Our aches were gone. We could have run across half the city without breaking a sweat. The moment we brought the statue of Jiangxia to the front door, an angry shout came from inside the house. "How dare you, you little thief!" Even in broad daylight, we could see a brilliant shooting star flash across the sky from the roof and disappear. The air visibly cleared. The musty smell dissipated, and the wall of roses blooming in the yard finally released their faint, sweet fragrance. Chloe and I hugged each other and wept. God only knew what we had been through these past few days. But our joy was short-lived. The phone rang again. Maya's voice was unusually serious. "Stella, I'm about to die. Come save me. Fast." And next story. While hiking with friends, we took shelter in a mountain inn. In the middle of the night, half asleep, I heard people talking downstairs. "This is a corpse driver's inn. We only take the dead, not the living. Letting these people stay here breaks the rules." Another voice paused. "It's fine. If we kill them all, it won't be breaking the rules." But they didn't know that I was a Maoshan priestess. And my friend is the last heir to a line of ancient geomancers. Have you ever heard of a man-bear? Legend has it that when a brown bear lives for more than 60 years, it becomes a man-bear. They have superior intelligence, can walk upright, and have a taste for human flesh. When a man-bear catches a person, it will stand up and grab their arms with its hands. Then it lets out a terrifying and bizarre laugh. "Stop, stop, stop." Tanya rolled her eyes and waved her hand as if shooing a fly. "Don't tell me this old woman's missing son has something to do with your man-bear." Right now, the few of us were crouched in a forest in the remote Appalachian Mountains. Heads huddled together, we were examining a giant footprint. The print was incredibly wide. You could clearly see a thick sole and 5 distinct toes, each tipped with an extremely sharp claw. "Tanya, maybe what Stella is saying is true." Sarah swallowed hard, her pretty face filled with fear. In these deep mountains, there might really be a man-bear. We had come into the mountains because of Sarah. She was a good friend of my friend Chloe, and she had organized a group for a deep mountain trek. The Appalachians were their first choice. The region was a maze of overlapping peaks, rarely visited by people, and full of mystery and the unknown. Not long after we entered the mountains, we found a small, rustic village. The village was built against the mountain, in a style somewhat reminiscent of stilt houses. The sun had set, and the sky was quickly turning dark. An old woman from the village, who was out gathering firewood, saw us and enthusiastically invited us to her home. The woman was in her 50s or 60s, with graying hair and a thin frame, but she seemed to be in good spirits. Her house was very clean, though there was a faint, fishy stench. Most of the people in this village were hunters, and many cured meats and animal pelts hung under the eaves. The stench was probably coming from the pelts. We had a very pleasant dinner at the woman's house, and we all ate until we were stuffed. But the woman herself grew more and more anxious. Her son had gone into the mountains in the afternoon and hadn't returned. Since we'd accepted her hospitality, we felt obligated to help. So a few of us volunteered to go into the mountains with her to find her son. Rustle, rustle. In the silent forest, a sound suddenly broke the quiet. It sounded like something large was crashing through the undergrowth, crawling rapidly toward us. Sarah was so scared she hid behind Tanya, her face pale. "What's that sound? I'm a little scared. Maybe we should go back first." Tanya put an arm around her shoulder and comforted her softly. "It's okay. There are so many of us. Nothing to be afraid of." I had initially suggested they stay in the village, but Sarah had refused. She thought hiking at night had a unique charm. Now I was starting to regret it. If it really was a man-bear, with Sarah and Tanya's speed, they would have a hard time escaping. "You guys stay here. I'll go check it out." Chloe volunteered, flicking her hair back with a flourish, which immediately earned her an adoring look from Sarah. "Go on, be careful." Chloe was a super rich kid with an arsenal of amazing gear. Even for a simple hike, she was armed to the teeth. Her backpack contained special-made pepper spray grenades and tear gas canisters. She could handle not just any wild animal, but even a real tiger or leopard, and still get away unscathed. Holy shit. Run. I watched as Chloe ran into the dense woods, only to come flying back out at an even faster speed. Her usually calm face was twisted in terror, her beautiful almond eyes wide with fear. Behind her, two massive brown bears were chasing her, one after the other. The larger one looked to be nearly 2 meters tall, with blood-red eyes and a gaping maw. Even from this distance, we could smell the foul stench wafting toward us. Holy shit. Tanya and Sarah were scared stiff, frozen in place. I turned my head about to tell them to run, when I saw that Maya was already a distant blur. I grabbed Sarah with my left hand and Tanya with my right, gathered my energy and bolted. Chloe followed close behind, throwing things from her bag as she ran. Brown bears can run incredibly fast, up to 50 kilometers per hour, almost as fast as a car. Luckily, this was a forest, dense with trees and uneven terrain. The bear was too large to run at full speed. If this had been open plains, the thought of that terrifying outcome sent a shiver down my spine, and I pulled the two of them along even faster. Bright flashes and pungent smells periodically erupted behind us. The smoke made my eyes water, and I couldn't stop sneezing. Tanya and Sarah had run out of steam long ago, and were practically being dragged forward by me. Fortunately, the heart-pounding roars finally grew more distant. Unfortunately, we were completely lost in the forest. In our frantic escape, Chloe had thrown almost everything from her bag. Even her flashlight was gone, used as a projectile to throw at the bears. We stumbled through the dark forest for what felt like an eternity. Sarah, rubbing her legs, declared she would rather be eaten by a bear than take another step. We had no choice but to sit down and rest. Maya collapsed onto the ground, panting heavily. After a moment, she started sniffing the air. "Do you guys smell barbecue?" Sarah rolled her eyes. "If I remember correctly, you had 4 bowls of rice for dinner. You're hungry already." Maya ignored her, patted the dirt off her pants, stood up, and walked around a thick pine tree. "Look, there's a light over there." It was a very old house. It was about 400 or 500 meters away from us, with 2 dim, yellow lanterns hanging by the door. The aroma seemed to be wafting from inside the house. Suddenly, no one's back was sore and no one's legs were tired. We helped each other up and walked toward the house. I followed at the back, frowning. Something felt off. The sudden appearance of the brown bears, and now this house hidden deep in the mountains. When I reached the house, I realized it was actually an inn. Time had worn away the sign, and the first 2 words were illegible. I could only make out the last word, written in a flamboyant script. Chloe leaned on my shoulder and remarked, "An inn, wow. This place must be hundreds of years old." Maya was also surprised. "This place is in the middle of nowhere. Do they really get any customers?" Sarah pushed past us and, without hesitation, knocked hard on the door. "Hello, anyone home?" During our escape, I had dragged them along like kites. Eventually, the kites had crash-landed. Sarah's pants had 2 large holes in them, and her hair was full of weeds. She looked like she had been rolling in the mud all day. Tanya was in even worse shape. So bad, in fact, that I almost didn't recognize the crazed-looking person in front of me as her. Creak. The wooden door opened from the inside, revealing a dark, square-jawed face. It was a young man not yet 30. He had thick eyebrows and a stern look. But for some reason, he looked vaguely familiar. He eyed us with a mixture of confusion and wariness. "Who are you looking for?" Sarah squeezed out a flattering smile. "Sir, we're hikers who got lost in the mountains tonight." After a long, hard look at us, the man opened the door wider. The layout of this inn was very strange. Inside the door was a spacious courtyard paved with large, clean-swept bluestone slabs. Most people build their houses facing south, but this courtyard faced north. On the north side were 2 very large rooms, their doors currently closed, so we couldn't see inside. The rooms on the east and west sides had no windows, only a single narrow door. And none of the rooms had a threshold. In ancient China, thresholds were extremely important. Back then, all doors were made of wood. The ground was often uneven, so the bottom of the door couldn't form a perfect seal with the floor. Over time, as the wood decayed and the ground became pitted, the gap under the door would grow larger. A threshold provided a better seal. It also helped to block wind, sand, floods, insects, and rodents, and it protected the wooden door from being scraped. At the same time, thresholds had a significant meaning in feng shui. They gathered wealth, collected energy, blocked yin, and repelled evil. This inn was in the middle of the wilderness. Logically, they should be even more wary of unclean things. Stella, get out of the way. I'm freezing to death. Tanya interrupted my thoughts, pushed past me, and walked toward the inn. She walked with a strange, bow-legged posture, her back hunched. Sarah linked arms with her, and they both spoke with embarrassed expressions. Sir, can we use your restroom? The man nodded and glanced at me and Chloe. I'll take them to the restroom. You two wait here. Don't wander off. As soon as the man left, Maya immediately sidled up to me. Something's wrong with this house. Maya was the heir to a line of geomancers, a descendant of the Imperial Astronomy Bureau, and her specialty was astrology and feng shui. She looked around and lowered her voice, frowning. This house isn't built according to the principles of feng shui for the living, but for the dead. I was startled. Feng shui is divided into two types, for the living and for the dead. The former, as the name suggests, is for the homes of living people. The latter is for the resting places of the dead. The ancients often placed more importance on the feng shui of tombs than on that of houses, because the quality of a tomb's feng shui affected the fortunes of future generations. But this was an inn. What future generations could there be? Who are you? An old, hoarse, and raspy voice rang out, startling us. I followed the sound and saw a short old man standing at the door of the west wing. The old man was exceptionally ugly. He had triangular eyes, a bulbous nose, and a dark spot on his face. He stared at us sinisterly, his expression far from friendly. Seventh Master, these are guests staying at the inn. The younger man emerged just in time and showed the old man a stack of cash. Before long, Tanya and Sarah came out of the restroom arm in arm, looking relaxed and chatting happily. In this wilderness, finding a clean place to rest had eased their tense nerves considerably. Unfortunately, this inn was clearly not a suitable place to stay. When Sarah heard I wanted to leave, she was on the verge of a breakdown. Tanya was even more exasperated, pulling me aside. We've already paid. You don't expect us to sleep in the woods in the middle of the night, do you? We left the tents and everything back at that old woman's house. Her words came out in a rush, a mix of anger and urgency. I glanced at the young man and the old man, then led the two of them to a corner, lowering my voice as much as possible. It's not that I don't want to stay. It's that this place might not be clean. Sarah blinked. This inn is very clean. The toilet might be basic, but it doesn't smell at all. Tanya nodded in agreement. It really is clean. There's not a speck of dust on the floor. Ahem, not that kind of not clean. I made a series of faces and gestures until they finally understood what I meant. Sarah and Tanya were both exchange students. I doubted they would believe in this sort of thing. I had been worried they would argue with me, but their reaction was not what I expected. Sarah let out a small laugh, and Tanya puffed out her chest confidently. Don't worry, I'm here. Sarah explained that Tanya was an exorcist. Not only was she skilled with tarot cards, but she also knew witchcraft for expelling evil spirits. And her teacher was a highly respected local pastor. Maya and I were both surprised. An international colleague. I just wasn't sure if foreign witchcraft would be effective against our local monsters and spirits. Sarah and Tanya were adamant about staying, especially after learning that I was a spiritualist and Maya was a geomancer's heir. Tanya's competitive spirit was instantly ignited. I'm not like you street corner hustlers. I have a real lineage and have even been baptized by the church. Me, Maya, Chloe. Excuse me, are you being serious? Seeing our grim expressions, Tanya snorted. My great-grandfather was a kingpin in the old fortune-telling rackets. Don't try to pull your little tricks on me. No wonder she was so dismissive of spiritualists and geomancers. As Chloe looked on in confusion, I rubbed my nose and awkwardly explained. The Jiangxiang school was an old syndicate of con artists who used fortune-telling to find their marks. Jiang meant the underworld, and Xiang meant minister together. It meant the ministers of the underworld. They usually operated under the guise of face reading or divination to gain a person's trust, analyze them, and then defraud them. The school was popular in the early Republic of China era in Guangzhou and Hong Kong. They had a lot of secret codes and sayings, which were basically a playbook for scam psychology. First, when someone comes for a reading, you don't speak first. You let them talk. The more they talk, the more information they reveal. Second, if parents come to ask about their son's fortune, it's usually about whether he'll be successful. The fact that they're asking means the son probably isn't doing well. You just have to say their son is immature or hasn't had his breakthrough yet, and you can't go wrong. Third, if a son comes to ask about his parents' fortune, it usually means his parents are in poor health. Logically, if the parents were fine, the child would never think to have their fortune told. Fourth, if a wife comes to ask about her husband, and she seems happy, you tell her he's about to get a promotion or a raise. If she looks distressed, it's likely he's lost money, been demoted, or is cheating on her. Fifth, if a husband comes to ask about his wife, there are only two possibilities. He suspects she's been unfaithful and has cheated on him, or she's unwell and can't have children. Other than that, men rarely think to have their wives' fortunes told. The members of the Jiangxiang school relied on their keen observation skills to manipulate people's psychology. Once they broke through a person's mental defenses, they would team up with other members of the school to carry out the scam. Those targeted by the Jiangxiang school would, at best, lose their money and suffer misfortune. At worst, they would lose their entire fortune. Seeing my detailed knowledge of the Jiangxiang school, Tanya's disdain for me grew. Stella, you and Maya aren't from that school too, are you? Damn it. This girl's insults were really low. Maya was so angry she was practically hopping, and I was struggling to keep my own temper in check. Tanya nodded knowingly. Oh, look at that. Exposed your true colors, and now you're getting defensive. Sarah awkwardly tugged on Tanya's sleeve. Tanya, that's enough. Stop. Tanya was clearly the type who couldn't let things go. Seeing our resentful faces, she muttered under her breath. Only you street corner hustlers would be scared of a little uncleanness. If a real ghost shows up, I'll show it the power of great Western exorcism. Maya and I were the types who would rather fight than argue. Getting into a shouting match with a young girl wouldn't be much of a victory anyway. Besides, she was Sarah's friend, and Sarah was Chloe's friend. Forget it. Why argue with her? A good, solid beating later would be much more satisfying. Seeing us clenching our teeth and saying nothing, Tanya became even more triumphant. Since they insisted on staying, I didn't try to stop them. Fine. If something really did happen, we'd get to see the power of great Western exorcism. The old man who ran the inn was named Old Man Miller. The young man was from a nearby village, and everyone called him Stone. He came to help at the inn right after middle school and had been here for over a decade. Did such a desolate inn really need help? I suspected they hardly got any customers all year round. After taking our money, Stone was very enthusiastic. He showed us to a room in the west wing and brought us hot water and a plate of wild vegetable buns. The room was simple. Besides a large communal sleeping platform, there was a single bed about a meter wide near the door. Other than that, there was only a creaky wooden table by the entrance. There wasn't even a wardrobe in the room, and there were no windows. When Stone lit the candle with a match, Sarah's expression faltered. Wait, you don't even have electricity here? Stone lit the candle and gave Sarah a helpless smile. We're in the deep mountains. There's only one in here. How could we get a special power line run out? Tanya looked at the pale candlelight, her face grim. Could you maybe switch to a red candle? We all turned to look at her. A sealed room, dim light, and a big red candle. The scene was enough to give someone with a weak heart a fatal heart attack. Tanya met our speechless gazes and awkwardly rubbed her nose. What? Doesn't red look a little warmer? In any case, having a roof over our heads was better than sleeping in the wilderness. The temperature in the mountains at night could freeze a person to death. Tanya and Sarah had been through a lot and were exhausted. They stopped complaining about the rustic room and lay down on the wooden platform, ready to sleep. But as soon as they lay down, they both sat up again. Sarah pouted, looking wronged. Why is this bed so hard? And it smells bad. Tanya was also disgusted. Is there a dead rat in this room? No, wait, it smells more like rotten eggs. At that moment, Maya and I were inspecting the room with a flashlight. Hearing this, I looked at her in surprise. Aren't you an exorcist? You can't smell the obvious stench of death? Gulp. Sarah swallowed loudly, her small face ashen in the candlelight. Can you guys please stop being so scary? Tanya put an arm around her shoulder and shot us a fierce glare. Sarah's easily scared. Don't frighten her. I raised the flashlight and gestured for them to look at the ceiling. This room is a long rectangle, with no windows on any side, and the wooden door is wider at the top than the bottom. Now look at the ceiling. It's wide at the entrance and gets narrower as you go deeper, forming a long trapezoid. And this table at the entrance, with 2 candles on it. Doesn't it feel familiar? Sarah and Tanya looked confused, but Chloe suddenly slapped her thigh. Damn, it's a coffin room. No wonder I felt a chill the moment I walked in. A coffin room is a feng shui setup typically used to harm people. Also known as a death energy room. It has no windows and a small door, so the air doesn't circulate. The yin and malevolent energy inside can't get out, so it seeps into the bodies of those who stay there. If a living person stays for 3 days, they'll start to develop death spots. After 7 days, not even the gods can save them. It seemed this and was a trap. After patiently listening, Tanya rolled her eyes so hard they almost disappeared into her head. Anyone who didn't know better would think you guys were acting in a horror movie. So what if the yin energy is a little strong? It's not that exaggerated. That's just how street hustlers are. They always make things sound spooky and mysterious, turning a 1-point scare into a 7.1. That trick in the Jiangxiang school is called the echo. You exaggerate the disaster to make people afraid. Didn't expect that, did you? I've seen through all your tricks. I really wanted to open this idiot's head and see what was inside. Maya and I exchanged a look and both started taking deep breaths. Chloe was also at a loss. She shook her head and lay down on the wooden platform with a grand gesture. Even if it is a coffin room, it doesn't matter. We're leaving tomorrow morning anyway. Let's all stop fussing and get some rest. We'll head down the mountain as soon as the sun comes up. Everyone was indeed exhausted. Maya, Chloe, and I were bold because we were skilled. Sarah and Tanya were fearless because they were ignorant. Hearing Chloe's words, everyone dragged their tired bodies onto the communal sleeping platform. The inn was incredibly quiet, without even the sound of birds or insects. After closing the door, it felt like lying in a coffin. It was as if the whole world had disappeared, leaving only us and the endless darkness. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of unhurried footsteps echoed, each step seeming to land right on my heart. Beside me, the breathing was long and heavy. Sarah and Tanya, exhausted, had already fallen into a deep sleep. I sat up, holding my breath, and listened intently to the sounds outside the door. Stone, you shouldn't have let them stay. This is against the rules. That voice belonged to the old man, Seventh Master. Stone's voice was also very low. Don't worry, Seventh Master. I know tonight is important. This is a corpse driver's inn. By the rules, we don't do business with the living. But after tonight, whether these girls live or die, is hard to say. Seventh Master paused, then sighed. Oh well. They brought this on themselves. This is their fate. They can't blame anyone else. The footsteps started again, and the two of them gradually walked away. I sat on the bed, hugging my blanket, my mind filled with questions. Why would they come to our door in the middle of the night just to have this conversation? Was it meant for us to hear? I never expected this to be a corpse driver's inn. Ghosts prefer cleanliness, which explained why the inn was spotless. This coffin room we were sleeping in was probably used to store the corpses. The narrow single bed by the door was likely for the corpse driver to sleep on. A coffin room isn't suitable for the living, but for corpses, it's an excellent accommodation. I just wondered what these two had planned for us. As I was deep in thought, a muffled sound came from beside me. Immediately, an indescribable smell filled the room. The room had no windows and was already stuffy. With this new smell, it was enough to knock you over. Damn it, who took a dump? Who? Maya shot up, turned on her flashlight, and screamed in a mix of horror and anger. Chloe groggily opened her eyes, and when she saw me sitting ramrod straight on the bed, her pupils contracted. Stella, did you shit your pants? Maya recoiled in horror and scrambled over to Chloe's side, both of them giving me the same disgusted look. The veins on my forehead throbbed. I stood up and lunged at them. I'll shit on your grandma. Uft. Another muffled sound. Tanya could no longer pretend to be asleep. She sat up, her face red, and whispered like a mosquito. Just fattig. Sarah also scrambled up, awkwardly clutching her stomach. Sorry, the second one was me. My stomach hurts. It's too dark in here, and I'm a little scared to go to the toilet. Tanya had just stood up when she clutched her stomach and sat back down on the bed. My stomach really hurts. Sarah anxiously tried to help her up, but as soon as she straightened her back, she frowned as well. My stomach doesn't feel right either. Her expression grew more and more pained, and she bent over like a shrimp. I can't hold it anymore. Can you help me to the toilet? Did they eat something bad? But after we got to the inn, Sarah and Tanya had found the wild vegetable buns too coarse and hadn't eaten a single bite. The plate they brought was finished by me and Maya. Even if it was food poisoning, it should have been us. Could it be the water? I helped Sarah up and gently held her chin to examine her face. Her complexion was poor, and her forehead was covered in a fine sheen of sweat. Wow, her eyelashes were quite long. But her eyes. In Sarah's dark pupils, there were several extremely thin red lines. These lines flickered across the whites of her eyes and disappeared so quickly that I almost thought I had imagined them. Damn it, she's been poisoned with goo. A corpse driver's inn. How could there be goo poison? In this region, corpse drivers and goo masters have always kept to themselves. Corpses are animated by a single breath of energy, and goo insects can easily startle them, causing them to reanimate violently. So there's an unwritten rule at corpse drivers' inns: no goo masters allowed. So where did this goo insect come from? And it was administered so stealthily that the six of us, with our 6 pairs of eyes, didn't notice a thing. Goo, what goo? Tanya was dismissive of the idea that she had been poisoned. Clutching her pale stomach, she still found the energy to argue with me. That's just feudal superstition. There's no such thing as goo magic in the world. My great-grandfather's junior was a self-proclaimed meow sorcerer, but it was all just smoke and mirrors. Sarah and we just have an upset stomach. Or maybe we caught a chill from the mountain wind. Maya's mouth twitched, and she looked utterly speechless as she helped Tanya up. All right, you can barely hold it in, and you're still being stubborn? I held Tanya's face and examined it from all angles, but I still couldn't figure out what kind of goo she had been poisoned with. It couldn't be helped. Meow goo magic is passed down through generations, and is extremely secretive. Moreover, there are as many types of goo insects as there are stars in the sky. Even someone who has studied goo for decades wouldn't be confident enough to say they could identify all the goo in the world, let alone amateurs like me and Maya. Quick, help me to the toilet. Tanya looked like if we didn't help her to the toilet, she would hang herself right then and there. I had no choice but to get out of bed and help her up. Chloe helped Sarah. Maya grabbed a flashlight and quickly pushed open the door. Just as we stepped outside, we heard a commotion at the inn's entrance. Ha ha ha, Stone, this time we've got some top-quality goods. The rough voice stopped abruptly when he saw us. A middle-aged man was wearing a yellow Taoist robe. He was sturdily built and had a very strong physique. With his full beard, he looked less like a Taoist priest and more like a bandit. Beside him stood a row of figures draped in black robes. 1, 2, 3. There were 5 in total. Odd numbers are yang, even numbers are yin. Unless there are special circumstances, a corpse driver usually travels with an even number of corpses. These figures were completely covered in black cloth, not even a toe showing. They weren't tall, all between 150–165 centimeters. Judging by their builds, they were all women. This was interesting. The journey of a corpse driver is long and arduous, and accidents are bound to happen. Corpse drivers often have to change the corpse's clothes and apply preservatives. The families of female corpses are very particular about their bodies not being touched by men, so there are a fair number of female corpse drivers. They only handle female corpses and do not accept male ones. I stared intently at the corpses, and the bearded man stared back at us. His gaze moved from me to Chloe, and then to Sarah. The more he looked, the brighter his eyes became. We stared at each other, and for a moment, no one spoke. Ahem, old Zhang. These are some tourists who were hiking in the mountains. They got lost and are just staying for one night. Stone gave the bearded man a look and broke the silence. Hiss. Tanya sucked in a sharp breath and, regaining her senses, pushed me weakly. Don't just stand there. Help me to the toilet. Tanya and Sarah spent a long time in the toilet, but couldn't produce anything. But as soon as they stood up, they felt like they were about to have explosive diarrhea again. Sarah was on the verge of tears. I'd rather be haunted. This is torture. Seeing her friend in such pain, Chloe was very anxious. Stella, is there anything we can do? I scratched my head. Different goo insects have different cures. Acting rashly could trigger a backlash from the goo inside them. I know what kind of goo this is. At this crucial moment, Maya held up a phone to my face. It's called red worm goo, a type of gone goo. On the Dragon Boat Festival, you take earthworms and centipedes, grind them into a powder, and place it before a shrine of the 5 plague gods. After a long period of worship, it becomes a poison. This gone goo is placed in wine, meat, rice, or vegetables for people to consume, or it's left on the road. Anyone who steps on it will be infected. The powder sticks to the intestines, causing unbearable abdominal bloating, and a desperate urge to vomit and have diarrhea. Curing this goo is actually very simple. This gone goo is of the earth element, and water overcomes earth. You just need to drink a large amount of water in a short period. Unrooted water is the most effective. I was stunned, looking at Maya with admiration. Wait, you just Googled it. Maya raised her eyebrows proudly. We have to believe in science. And more importantly, we have to believe in the power of the internet. Right now it was a desperate measure, but it was all we had. At least water couldn't kill them. But there was no running water in this inn, and we didn't dare use the water Stone had brought us. I had Maya and Chloe help the others back to the room while I went into the forest to collect dew. So-called unrooted water is water that has not touched the ground. Rainwater is best, and dew is the next best thing. When Stone heard I was going out, he seemed reluctant. It's late, and it's dark. What are you going out for? I made up an excuse. I'm a light sleeper. I keep hearing insects, and it's keeping me awake. I'm just going to shoo them away. I'll be right back. Seeing that I was going out alone, Stone frowned but didn't say anything more. The man called Old Zhang gave me a few long looks before ringing a bell and leading the corpses into the inn. I didn't go far. Instead, I hid behind a tree and secretly watched them. The way these corpses hopped was extremely strange. The journey of a corpse driver is long, so the corpses, manipulated by the driver's secret techniques, usually take large leaps. It's no exaggeration to say that one jump covers at least a meter. Chloe, Maya, and I once disguised ourselves as corpses and joined a corpse driving team. I'm not exaggerating when I say it almost gave me a heart attack. But this team of corpses, each jump was at most half a meter. They looked almost like normal people. With many questions in my mind, I quickly collected 2 cups of dew. It was more like accumulated water from the trees than actual dew. Sarah and Tanya were lucky. There was a natural hollow in the branch of an old pine tree. It had rained in the forest a few days ago, and there was still a good amount of water in the hollow. After drinking the water, Sarah and Tanya's stomach aches did indeed subside. Tanya blinked, her face pale, and forced a justification. It was probably just a stomach ache that got better on its own. I was already feeling better when I lay down. Even without this water, we would have been fine. Goo magic is just a bunch of nonsense. I had to admire her. This girl was really stubborn. After a long night, we were all exhausted. We couldn't be bothered with whatever was going on outside. We just needed to rest for a while. We'd deal with whatever came our way when it came. I wanted to sleep, but Tanya wouldn't let me. She sat on the edge of my bed, stroking her chin with a serious expression. Stella, I've researched corpse driving. The whole making corpses hop thing is just an exaggerated folk tale. Real corpse driving requires at least 3 people and 2 long bamboo poles. The corpse driver secures multiple bodies to the bamboo poles and moves them by controlling the ends of the poles. Because they usually work at night from a distance, it looks like the corpses are walking on their own. This process looks very strange, which has led to corpse drivers being misunderstood and demonized by the outside world. So I conclude that those people we saw earlier weren't corpses at all, but living people. I lay on the bed, feeling utterly lifeless. I didn't even want to lift a finger. Lady, aren't you tired? Tanya got angry, put her hands on her hips, and her eyebrows shot up. What, you don't believe me? Sarah, looking helpless, pulled at her arm and said softly, Tanya, I believe you. But it's really late. Can we talk about it tomorrow? Tanya pouted and shot me a glare. Just you wait. You'll soon find out that I'm right. Maya and Chloe had already lain down, their eyes closed, pretending not to hear her. I also turned my back, showing her the back of my head. Seeing that no one was paying attention to her, Tanya had no choice but to lie down huffily. After tossing and turning for a while, there was finally silence. Crunch, 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 crunch. I was woken up by the sound of someone eating. Because we were worried about needing to get up in the night, the candle in the room hadn't been extinguished. Now the white candle was burning faintly, but its flame had a greenish tint. I sat up, and the others slowly woke up as well. Maya rubbed her eyes and, after a drowsy look around, said irritably, Sarah, what are you eating? Why are you eating alone? What's so good that you had to wake up in the middle of the night to eat it by yourself? I want some. Sarah had her back to us, squatting in a corner and gnawing on something, not even looking up. Maya walked over and patted her on the shoulder, holding out her hand. Sarah's body stiffened, and then she slowly turned her head. It was the face of a strange woman. Slender eyes, willow leaf eyebrows, and a black mole on the tip of her delicate nose. I rubbed my eyes, almost thinking I had seen wrong. The clothes, the hairstyle, even the face shape, it was clearly Sarah. Her hair was not only thick but also dark and shiny. On our hike, she had gotten her hair caught on a branch and had been lamenting about it for a long time. The Sarah in front of me blinked, and her face returned to its original appearance. It was as if what had just happened was merely a hallucination. She grinned at Maya and then held up her blood-stained hands. Only 2 thumbs remained on her 10 fingers. The rest was a bloody, mangled mess, disgusting to look at. Do you want some too? That crunching sound. Was Sarah chewing on her own fingers? Tanya pinched me hard, then let out a sigh of relief. It doesn't hurt. I must be dreaming. I slapped her on the head. Wake up. Your best friend is possessed by a ghost. Damn it. Chloe was the first to react. She did a carp flip out of bed and lunged at Sarah. Chloe was fast, but Sarah was faster. She used her hands and feet to cling to the corner of the wall, like a gecko, and scrambled up to the ceiling in a few moves. And behind her, a long scorpion tail whipped back and forth. The tail had a finger-thick barb at the end, which glowed with a faint blue light, clearly venomous. I had seen my fair share of ghosts, but I had never seen anything so bizarre. Tanya screamed and hid behind me, then after a moment, gritted her teeth and peeked out. Is Sarah really possessed? Maya and I exchanged a look, both of our faces grim. The thing possessing Sarah wasn't quite a ghost. She seemed to be under the influence of some kind of vicious goo magic. Tanya started to cry. She wiped her eyes and stood up. Damn you, evil spirit. If you're going to possess someone, possess Stella. Why are you bullying Sarah? Sarah, don't be afraid. I'm here to save you. With that, she opened her pocket and carefully took out a small cloth pouch. Then, from the pouch, she pulled out 3 heads of garlic. Garlic. I watched as she carefully peeled 1 head of garlic and picked out the 2 largest cloves. Then, she gathered her energy, let out a sharp cry, and threw the 2 cloves at Sarah. Demon, take this. The garlic hit Sarah on the forehead and then fell to the ground. TSK, her aim was pretty good. You could tell she'd practiced. But why was she practicing this? Sarah's beautiful almond eyes flashed with confusion. Maya's mouth twitched, her expression unreadable. What's this? You're going to treat her to dumplings? Now that you've served the garlic, should we bring out the vinegar? I didn't get it either. Was Western exorcism always this unconventional? Tanya blinked her big eyes, her gaze filled with a pure, unadulterated stupidity. That's strange. Why isn't there a reaction? Chloe, Maya, and I exchanged looks, unsure of what kind of reaction Sarah was supposed to have. Tanya bit her lip, her expression more solemn than ever. It seems this ghost has some power. In that case, Don't force me to be ruthless. She's about to unleash her ultimate move. The three of us held our breath and looked up at Tanya expectantly. I still had a flicker of hope. After all, I had seen Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings. When Western exorcists made a move, there were lightning flashes and sparks flying everywhere. The special effects were maxed out. Maya was also a little nervous, her hand gripping my arm. I watched as Tanya crossed her arms in front of her chest, tilted her head back, and struck a pose like a magical girl about to transform. Demon, face the judgment of the holy light. She took a step back with her left leg, then flung her arms out and back in. Her hands crossed repeatedly in the air, looking remarkably similar to the old ladies doing square dancing in front of my apartment building. After 3 such repetitions, she stared straight ahead, raised her right hand high, and shouted, "God grant me strength." In her raised right hand, she clutched a glittering silver cross. Maya was stunned, her eyes wide and her mouth agape. Is this a Sailor Moon transformation sequence? I was also a little dumbfounded, but deep down, I still held on to a sliver of anticipation. Quiet, the power is coming. Tanya didn't move, so we didn't dare move either. But Sarah moved. She opened her mouth with a piercing shriek, leaped down from the ceiling, landed on all fours, and then shot her hand out to grab Tanya's ankle. Tanya was pulled off balance and fell flat on her back. Sarah dragged Tanya out of the room, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Chloe opened her mouth, her voice dazed. The power is gone. I slapped my thigh and took off running. Damn it, after them. As if waking from a dream, Maya and Chloe followed close behind me. As she ran, Maya exclaimed, "Chloe, that's your friend?" I also felt a wave of disbelief. Seeing Tanya's confident demeanor, I had thought she actually had some skills. Who could have guessed she knew nothing at all? Your friend is certainly confident. Chloe, embarrassed and angry, pressed her lips together and said nothing. But her feet moved even faster, as if she were riding on wind and fire wheels. We were fast, but Sarah was faster. She effortlessly dragged Tanya along and disappeared around a corner in a few moves. There was a very spacious room there, its wooden door ajar, a warm light spilling out from the crack. Crash! Without hesitation, I kicked the door open and was met by 3 pairs of startled eyes. Where is it? Where is it? Demon, don't you run! Maya and Chloe charged in one after the other, both slamming into my back. 6 pairs of eyes stared at each other. The atmosphere was suddenly very awkward. This was also a coffin room. On the north side was a row of large sleeping platforms. The female corpses were all lying neatly on them. Stone and Old Man Miller were sitting on small stools by the door drinking. On the table were a plate of peanuts and a plate of braised beef, which made me feel a little hungry. And that corpse driver, Old Zhang, was crouched on the sleeping platform, pinching a female corpse's face and feeding her medicine. My sudden entrance had startled all 3 of them. Ahem, eating are we? I cleared my throat, sat down on a small stool, and casually picked up 2 pieces of beef. Smells pretty good. Old Man Miller stared at me with heavy-lidded eyes, then suddenly smiled. You're a bold one, little girl. After laughing, he turned back to Old Zhang. These 3 are no good. Don't let them ruin our business. You can have those 2 girls. These 3, leave them to me. Old Zhang was not pleased. His beard trembled, and he said in a gruff voice, "These are all top-quality goods, worth a lot of money." As he spoke, he made a gesture in front of his chest. They're all in their 20s, fresh and pretty. We can get at least 50,000 for each of them. How arrogant, talking about selling us right in front of our faces. Chloe's nose was practically crooked with anger. How much? 50,000. Damn it, you're worth 50,000. Your whole family is worth 50,000. Old Zhang chuckled, his chest vibrating, looking very pleased. Well, now a feisty one. I like that spirit. She'll be fun to train. This one's mine. You can have the other 2. Next to him lay a female corpse. Her features were plain, not exactly pretty, but her skin was very fair. I stared at her face for a moment, and confirmed my earlier suspicion. You're not corpse drivers. You're human traffickers. I have to admit, these traffickers had found a very safe route. They disguised the girls they kidnapped as corpses. They traveled through the deep mountains and old forests, which not only kept them out of sight, but also helped them avoid being tracked. Even if they ran into people on the way, everyone was so superstitious about corpse drivers that no one dared to take a closer look. But disguising someone as a corpse was easier said than done. The journey was long and arduous, and the girls had to hop like real corpses. I had taken a quick look earlier. All the girls were in a deep sleep, as if they were dead. One of their 3 souls and 7 spirits was missing. That's why they didn't eat, drink, speak, or make a sound like walking corpses. But extracting a person's soul is not something a goo master is skilled at. Could it be that this inn not only had a famous goo master but also an evil sorcerer? My gaze shifted from old Zhang to Stone, and finally rested on Old Man Miller's face. Seeing me staring at him, Old Man Miller gave a sinister smile and continued to drink from his bowl. It was him. He had an air of confidence and power, as if he looked down on everyone. A goo master? Or an evil sorcerer? Old Man Miller's eyes lit up. He put down his bowl and looked at me with surprise. Well, we have someone who knows her stuff. Crash! Chloe kicked over the wooden table, sending the food and wine spilling all over the floor. Give me back my friends. Stone and Old Zhang were in perfect sync. The moment Chloe moved, they both shrank back into a corner. Old Man Miller wiped his mouth and stood up, his old face a mixture of pride and showing off. I am a ghost goo master. I refine goo with ghosts and I raise ghosts with goo. I was startled by Old Man Miller's words. Ghost goo masters were rarer than pandas, existing only in legends. These guys were truly evil. Ordinary goo masters use various insects to refine goo, but they use ghosts directly. The resulting creatures are neither demon nor ghost, and their methods of refining ghost goo are exceptionally cruel. To refine a ghost goo, you don't start with a ghost. You need a living person. You extract the person's 3 souls and 7 spirits one by one to feed the goo insects. Finally, you torture the person to death. Just before they die, you feed them the goo insects. When their souls and spirits return to the body, they die and become a ghost, and thus a ghost goo is created. So the thing that possessed Sarah earlier must have been a ghost goo. Ghost goo are extremely mean and evil, fantastically strange, and very difficult to deal with. Chloe, Maya, you go find Sarah. I'll handle these guys. Hurry. If a ghost goo possesses someone for more than 2 hours, not even the gods can save them. Chloe gave me a worried look, then turned and ran without hesitation, with Maya close behind. You bastard, take this. As soon as Chloe and the others left, I dodged Old Man Miller and went straight for Old Zhang with my fists. I'll beat you to death, you goddamn human trafficker. Always pick the weakest opponent first. He was a human trafficker, after all. Beating him to death would be letting him off easy. Although Old Man Miller was skilled in magic, he was old, and his reflexes weren't as sharp. While he was still preparing his spell, I had already beaten Old Zhang unconscious. Stone tried to help him, but I twisted his arm behind his back, grabbed his hair, and slammed his head against the wall. After 2 loud thuds, Stone grunted, a patch of red blooming on his forehead, and collapsed to the ground. Old Man Miller was shocked. You, a young Taoist from a righteous sect, and yet your methods are so vicious. Pa. After quickly dealing with Stone and the others, I spat on the ground. Screw you. I have the heart of a bodhisattva and the methods of a thunder god. What do you know? Old Man Miller's ultimate move obviously took some time to cast. He didn't stick around to fight. He made a decisive choice and ran out of the room. I chased after him, but ended up crashing right into Maya. She stumbled from the impact, almost falling on her butt. When she saw me, it was as if she'd seen her savior. Holy shit. What do we do? Sarah and Tanya have merged. What? Just then, Chloe came running around the corner, clutching a handful of talismans. She raised her hand to throw them, then hesitated and lowered it again, her face a mask of conflict. When I saw what was chasing her, I couldn't help but rub my eyes. Holy shit. It was a giant monster. It had the body of a centipede, the tail of a scorpion, and 6 crayfish-like claws on its abdomen. Even more bizarrely, it had 2 human heads growing from its neck. One was Sarah's, the other was Tanya's. Both had the same pained expression, their brows furrowed, their lips half open, like dying fish. Seeing me, Tanya struggled to open her mouth. God, grant me strength. I was almost touched by this girl. Even in this state, she hadn't forgotten her exorcism. Chloe ran to my side, wiping the sweat from her face in frustration. If we kill this thing, will Sarah and Tanya die too? I gritted my teeth and said fiercely, damn it, I don't care anymore. Let's just cripple it first. Just don't hit the heads. If we kept hesitating like this, we'd be the ones to die. Maya was panting heavily, her face flushed from running. Normal talismans don't work. This thing seems to be wearing armor. A sword strike doesn't even leave a mark. By now, Old Man Miller had reached the middle of the courtyard. Seeing our cautious approach, he smiled smugly, his hands behind his back. They've both been possessed by this ghost goo. Not just their bodies, but their souls will be poisoned by the goo too. By morning, they'll become a permanent part of the ghost goo. Old Man Miller wasn't lying. Sarah had been possessed for longer, and already looked dazed and unresponsive. Tanya's voice was getting weaker, and she was speaking less frequently. It was clear she was gradually losing her consciousness and reason. No matter how I looked at this monster, I couldn't find a weak spot. A goo master and their goo insects are connected by mind. If we couldn't cripple it, killing Old Man Miller would at least severely weaken the goo. Forget this thing for now. Let's surround Old Man Miller. I threw a handful of glutinous rice at the ghost goo. As expected, it had no effect. Ghosts are Yin creatures, but some goo insects are Yang. This ghost goo had consumed a Yang goo, so although it was Yin, it had Yang properties and wasn't particularly afraid of things like glutinous rice and cinnabar. Seeing the three of us heading straight for him, Old Man Miller panicked for a moment. He was old. If we got close, he'd be in trouble. Bao stopped them. Old Man Miller pulled a bone flute from his sleeve and blew 2 mournful notes. The ghost goo, which had been lying dormant, immediately twisted its body and slithered toward me upon hearing the flute. That bone flute must have been made from the skull of the ghost goo's former self. Chloe, that girl is seriously rich. Ordinary talismans had little effect on this ghost goo, but the expensive 5 thunder talismans were the bane of all Yin creatures. Ghosts feared them, and goo insects feared them even more. She threw out a 5 thunder talisman, which gave Old Man Miller a huge shock. The ghost goo was struck and let out a series of shrieks, its movements slowing down considerably. Old Man Miller glared at Chloe with jealousy. Heh, that talisman must be a prized treasure of your sect, right? You've paid such a heavy price just to scratch my bow. After you've used up your talismans, let's see how arrogant you can be. Old Man Miller couldn't finish his sentence. He stared, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, looking like a complete idiot. Because in the blink of an eye, Chloe had thrown out 3 more 5 thunder talismans. In an instant, the entire courtyard was filled with lightning and thunder, as bright as day. Countless bolts of lightning, like swimming dragons, descended with a mighty force. His big move, which he had been charging up, was just starting to take effect. Numerous goo insects were rustling out from under the bluestone slabs. Now, struck by the lightning, they all fell to the ground, their bodies charred black. A pungent, burnt smell filled the courtyard, giving it the strange feeling of a barbecue joint. These goo insects were just collateral damage. The one that got hit the hardest was the ghost goo. Its scorpion tail was broken, and of its 6 large claws, only 2 remained, hanging limply from its body. Old Man Miller's eyes were practically splitting with rage. He let out a grief-stricken cry. Bow! You. I don't believe you have any more 5 thunder talismans. Maya and I looked at him with pity. He didn't know that Chloe couldn't stand being taunted. Her daily mantra was, a woman can never say she can't. Anyone can say they can't, but not me, Chloe Song. A strong woman is just that confident. While Old Man Miller's attention was focused on his goo insects and Chloe, I snuck up behind him and kicked him to the ground. Old Man Miller cried out as he fell forward. I stepped on his back, pinning him down. Damn it, tell me now. How do I get this ghost goo off my friends? Cough, cough. Old Man Miller spat out 2 mouthfuls of dark red blood, and turned his head to give me a cold smile. Not talking, huh? I'll smash this damn bone flute of yours. Old Man Miller struggled fiercely, trying to get up. I flipped him over and roughly snatched the bone flute from his grasp. The small flute was incredibly cold in my hand, so cold it made me shiver. Crack! I slammed the flute onto the ground. The white bone flute rolled a couple of times but remained unscathed. Old Man Miller let out a sigh of relief, but before he could fully relax, I picked up the flute and threw it to Chloe. Chloe, blast it with a 5 thunder talisman. Old Man Miller could no longer hold it in, and let out a piercing scream. Stone, get your ass out here now. Stone. Didn't I knock Stone unconscious? The ground began to tremble slightly, and a familiar foul smell wafted from the main entrance. Holy shit. It was the 2 bears. Those 2 bears were raised by Stone. The 5 thunder talismans were effective against the ghost goo, but their effect on the bears was limited. They had thick hides and weren't eating creatures. The lightning could scare them, but it couldn't kill them. I was chased around the courtyard by the 2 bears, completely forgetting about Old Man Miller. Stone took this opportunity to run into the courtyard and help Old Man Miller to the side. Old Man Miller's face was dark, his eyes filled with a deep hatred for us. Let Big Bear and Little Bear kill them. Leave no one alive. Chloe and Maya were also being chased by the bears, scrambling for their lives. The ghost goo, relieved, dragged its mangled body to a corner. What do you do when you and your friends encounter a bear in the woods? You don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun your friends. Great, and I had 2 such friends. Chloe and Maya's escape was perilous. They were almost caught by the bears several times. In contrast, I was having a much easier time. Chloe was so angry she was rolling her eyes. She threw the talismans and the bone flute at me. Damn it, you're so free. You figure out what to do with this stupid flute. I clutched the bone flute, dodged them a few times, and found a secluded corner. After all that running, I had finally pieced things together. This village was a criminal den. They raised 2 bears specifically to hunt down tourists who wandered into the mountains. After the victims were killed by the bears, they would loot their belongings. No wonder that old woman's house smelled so foul. And her house was a mess of mismatched things. The old woman was even wearing a 4-leaf clover bracelet. It seemed Old Man Miller was also from the village. This village not only hunted people with bears but also trafficked women. It was utterly depraved. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I bit my finger and drew a lightning-attracting array on the bone flute, then climbed onto the roof with it. Boundless universe, lend me your power. Summon all spirits, by the command of the 5 thunders. With the help of the lightning array, the heavenly thunder this time was even more spectacular. The thunder rumbled, and the entire courtyard began to shake violently. Cough, cough, that was close. Almost got struck by lightning. There was a large hole in the roof. Big Bear and Little Bear stopped their pursuit and huddled together, their heads in their paws, clearly terrified by the display of heavenly might. I had jumped directly from the roof, rolling several times on the ground to break my fall. I stood up, disheveled, and saw that the ghost goo, after being struck by the residual lightning, had actually grown a 3rd head. It had slender eyes and a small mole on the tip of its nose. It was the same face I had seen on Sarah earlier. Could she be the ghost goo's original form? I turned to look for Old Man Miller, intending to finish him off while he was down, but I noticed Stone's expression was strange. He stood up, trembling, and stared at the ghost goo in disbelief. His lips moved for a long time, and his eyes filled with tears. You, is that you? He reached out a trembling hand, wanting to touch the ghost goo's face, but after a few steps, he lost his balance and fell to the ground. The shock and stimulation were so overwhelming that he seemed unable to even walk straight. Hearing the name you, the ghost goo seemed to react. It raised its head and looked at Stone with confusion and pain. Chloe and Maya ran to my side, both with gossipy looks on their faces. What's going on here? I didn't understand either. I scratched my head and put away the talismans. Let's wait and see. Old Man Miller. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Stone suddenly stood up, his eyes blazing with intense hatred. Old Man Miller, you bastard. He grabbed Old Man Miller and rained down punches on him. Amidst his anguished roars, the 3 of us squatted to the side, listening with a mix of emotions. It turned out this ghost goo was Old Man Miller's own daughter. You and Stone were lovers. But Old Man Miller looked down on Stone for being poor and refused to approve their marriage. The two bears were raised by Stone since they were cubs. With no other choice, Stone started following Old Man Miller, killing and committing arson and trafficking women. But Old Man Miller was still not satisfied. You was a kind girl. When she found out about these things, she begged Stone to elope with her. She said she didn't want Stone to continue helping her father harm people. They planned to go to the big city to work and be an ordinary couple, but Old Man Miller found out. From that day on, you disappeared. Old Man Miller said she had gone to the provincial capital to work. If Stone wanted to see you, he had to become his apprentice and learn ghost goo magic. Only when he had mastered the art could they get married. Stone studied from the age of 18 to, and the more he learned about ghost goo, the more he understood the suffering you had endured. You bastard! Give me back my you. Give her back to me. A grown man was crying so hard he could barely breathe, his face a mess of tears and snot. It was a pitiful sight. But when I thought about how he had been willing to traffic women with Old Man Miller just to marry the girl he loved, I couldn't feel much sympathy. Old Man Miller had several teeth knocked out. When he opened his mouth, blood gushed out. That ungrateful brat. Not only did she not want to learn ghost goo magic, she was even planning to call the police. The Miller family's ghost goo art has been passed down for generations. How can it end with me? What did I do wrong? I gave her life, I raised her. Her life is mine. I'll kill you. I'll kill you. Enraged, Stone swung his fists, landing blow after heavy blow on Old Man Miller. Gradually, Old Man Miller stopped moving. His face was no longer recognizable, just a pulp of flesh. The heir to the ghost goo, Old Man Miller, had been beaten to death by his only apprentice. Thump, thump, thump. Stone's hands were already raw, the skin broken and revealing the bright red flesh beneath. But he was like a numb puppet, mechanically swinging his fists, tirelessly striking again and again. I sighed and walked over, grabbing his hand. That's enough. He's dead. You know that Yu's souls and spirits have been refined into the ghost goo. She has no hope of reincarnation. If you want her to pass on peacefully, you have to let her go. Stone looked up, staring at me blankly. How do I let her go? Kill her. You. I pressed down on Stone's shoulders and leaned in, looking at him very seriously. Her soul and body are trapped forever in this ghost goo. The ghost goo feeds on living souls. It kills who knows how many innocent people every year. She was a righteous and kind girl. If she were still alive and knew she had become this, she would surely beg you to kill her. Stone closed his eyes in pain, 2 lines of bloody tears running down his dark, thin face. Before you kill her, you have to release my friends. Having lost his lover, Stone was like a walking corpse. He agreed to all my conditions with almost no hesitation. He took a dagger and, without a second thought, cut open Old Man Miller's chest. He then dug out a thumb-sized snake. He cut off the snake's head, squeezed out a small bowl of its blood, and fed it to Sarah and Tanya. Before long, the ghost goo's body began to contract violently, quickly shrinking to less than half its size. Beside it lay Sarah and Tanya, their faces pale. After doing all this, Stone picked up the ghost goo and gave us a faint glance. The female corpses are in the west wing. Their missing souls and spirits are hidden by Old Man Miller in a clay pot on the roof of that wing. Take your people and rest there. I don't want to be disturbed. He carried the ghost goo and walked toward the east wing, as if he were holding a priceless treasure. I nodded and motioned for Maya and Chloe to carry Sarah and Tanya to the west wing. By the time I had awakened the other girls, the sky was gradually brightening, a sliver of dawn appearing in the east. But the east wing was ablaze, smoke billowing into the air. Stone had set himself on fire with the ghost goo. The 2 bears whimpered in the courtyard for a while, then finally, with great reluctance, turned and headed down the mountain, looking back every few steps. By now, Tanya and Sarah were awake and had heard the whole story from Chloe. Sarah was both scared and sad, her eyes as red as a rabbit's. Fortunately, her fingers were fine. The ghost goo had actually been chewing on the goo insects it had raised. Tanya sat quietly, her head bowed, her arms crossed, saying nothing. All right, the traffic girls are awake too. Let's all pack up and head down the mountain. Wah. Tanya suddenly looked up and started wailing. Liars. They're all liars. I'll never forgive imperialism. I hate seeing girls cry, so I had to bite the bullet and try to comfort her. Actually, those moves you did, they looked pretty cool. Like a magical girl. Wah! Tanya cried even louder. My head was throbbing. I quickly ushered everyone down the mountain. The girls were weak and needed to be taken to a hospital to recover. Forcing themselves to walk down the mountain now, they were slower than turtles. Maya and Chloe also looked exhausted and soon asked for a break. I rubbed my empty stomach and decided to go into the woods to hunt for some game to replenish our energy. Just as I was about to leave, Maya suddenly grabbed me, her expression serious. Stella, look. She held out her phone, pointing to a message on the screen. The sender was a jumble of random characters, making it impossible to tell who it was from. The message was short, just 2 sentences. Ehe, very impressive. You can even handle a ghost goo. But your next trial will be even more dangerous. I snapped my head up. The forest was silent. Besides us, there wasn't another soul in sight. Chloe was so angry she started cursing. Damn it, can't a person get a break? I sighed and sat down on the ground. All right, get ready for the sequel. End.